Welcome, listeners, and thank you for tuning in to a special Claritas Fireside chat in celebration of International Women's Day. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking to a powerful and influential woman in her industry, Stephanie Costa, Director of Media at Republica Havas, an international agency creating relevant, enduring connections between brands and people across culture, language, and technology. So, Stephanie is joining me to talk about what brands need to do to succeed in today's environment, where there's room for growth when it comes to proper female representation across channels and industries, and a whole lot more. So, Stephanie, thank you for joining me today for our fireside chat.
Thank you, Monique. That was such a wonderful intro. Thanks so much. I'm honored to be here.
So, before I jump into the questions that I have for you today, can you give our listeners a glimpse into who you are and what you do at Republica Havas?
Sure. So I am, just to start with a little bit of a background, I am a Latina born and raised in Miami. And I've been in the media industry, specifically on the agency side, for a little over 20 years now. So that spanned not only media agencies that I worked at in New York City, but also full service agencies, mostly here in Miami. And as you said, I'm the media director at Republica Havas. And I do manage a team of media experts and also oversee all of our active media accounts, as well as do a lot of consulting across other accounts that we work with within the agency.
So, you are busy then.
Oh, that's yes, an understatement.
Understatement.
Yes.
So I'm glad that we could have you on because I know we've sort of been talking about this for a little while now, and I am eager for you to share your expertise with our audience. And I want to start by mentioning one of the strategic mantras of Republica Havas, and that's rethink relevant. And I think that couldn't be any more timely considering everything that happened in 2020, from the pandemic to the calls for social justice, the election, the list kind of goes on and on. So I'm curious from your perspective, what do you think are the top 3 to 5 things that it will take for a brand to become or remain relevant to consumers this year?
Awesome. I love what you did there, bringing rethink relevant into a question. I think that's great. I do want to just caveat by saying that I think it's a question we should really be asking ourselves pretty regularly, but
Right.
especially to your point, after some significant events, right? So, the first thing that comes to mind is really the notable behavior shifts that we've seen over the past year. We're not really sure, of course, if those are going to turn out to be long term and in what we hope will eventually be a post COVID world. But until we get data that says otherwise, I think that there is definitely a lot to be considered, especially within the digital space, right?
Hmm.
So, there I'm thinking about two kind of different areas. The one is, digital consumption has already been proven to be really substantial, but we've seen even more of a shift towards digital and streaming platforms, and that's both
Hmm.
audio and video, right? We're seeing this rise of podcasts, this rise of streaming platforms like Pandora and Spotify. And again, those were already high to begin with, but we really did see even more of a shift to consumption in those areas, not to mention, things like Disney Plus and Hulu subscribers and all of that going up. If your plan currently doesn't include really robust digital component to it, then it's absolutely something that you should look to include. And along the same lines, in terms of digital behavior, we're seeing this huge shift towards e-com. And there is already some data out there that says that some of these behaviors really might be here to stay. For a lot of brands and agencies, we had to think about how we potentially needed to pivot in this specific area. There was a real sense of urgency to move the business and get a buttoned up e-com strategy if you didn't already have one. And then one last thing I want to mention is measurement.
Hmm.
The only way to know if in fact you are being relevant is to measure that. And whatever that, sort of means, it can mean so many things, but it's also important to keep a pulse on exactly how you're doing via measurement.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you made, especially when it comes to measurement. Don't wait to the end of the campaign to do all of your measurement. You should kind of keep measuring what you're doing in process, in flight, so that you know if you need to make some adjustments. And I think the same thing can go for remaining relevant to consumers.
Absolutely.
So, like I said in my introduction, Republica Havas is known for creating relevant and enduring connections across cultures. And in recently released Claritas reports, our data shows that certain channels, and you mentioned it too, have more influence than others for multicultural audiences. So, what are you seeing in terms of shifts in media habits? And are you noticing that advertisers are increasing their budgets for those well performing channels or social channels like Instagram or Facebook?
Yeah, definitely. I want to just start by saying, of course, first party data is what we try and lean on whenever
Mhm.
possible. But not all clients have the right measurement in place necessarily. So we do have to rely a lot on secondary research and on research by companies like Claritas. Um, it definitely gives you the rationale that you need in order to either make recommendations to something new that's sort of never been done
Right.
before when there's like little to no historical data, but also for testing opportunities. Again, it's something that we should be continuously looking at. How can we amp up your current plan, or what is it that we're missing out on from media consumption habits perspective? So definitely it's super helpful. We are seeing some shifts. We are constantly having these conversations with our clients as well. Most clients are very receptive and are making those shifts.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we've noticed the same thing too. So it's just good to hear from others that the data trends are actually driving action. But moving on though, I'd imagine that most companies sort of create a strategic roadmap of some sorts towards the end of each year, and they expect to implement that for the following year. But everyone's plans were thrown for a loop in 2020 with the pandemic.
Gosh.
So, your answer to my next question, it might be connected to the one I asked about relevancy, but do you think marketers are approaching their allocation of resources differently due to COVID-19 and other world events that have happened and are happening, or are they just talking about it?
Think that clients are struggling to a certain extent with determining what their place is with some of these topics and what kind of a role they should take. So they are looking to us for recommendations on how to do just that. So it's always important to try and think ahead and make future plans when possible. The significant events like the ones that you described for 2020, of course, have really catapulted us in a way that there's just no turning back. It allowed for us to see some glaring gaps, perhaps, that we didn't see
Right.
before or that weren't as relevant as they are now. So many of us, agencies and clients both included, we had to pivot. We had to learn how to be flexible, really how to be more
Hmm.
agile. At the same time, it really helped to even build trust between clients and agencies more so than where we were at, because we really came through and we had to bring recommendations to the table based on what was
Right.
happening now. And at the same time, it also helped to build further trust and brand loyalty between brands and consumers as well, because we were able to successfully pivot in so many ways, not only from a media perspective, and we did look at our plans and say, okay, what makes sense and what doesn't, and what do we need to shift.
Hmm.
But we also did that from a messaging perspective. So it was really cool the way that we all came together to impact the businesses and be relevant to your point earlier.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue into this next question then. So, we've talked a little bit about what companies should be doing, but I want to touch on what they've actually done, especially when it comes to growth segments like multicultural audiences. Can you share any specific tactics or campaigns that have kind of worked better than expected with clients of yours that have made multicultural advertising a focus?
Yeah, I think that some things do immediately come to mind, be it specific tactics that are, more
Mm-hmm.
grassroots or influencer based. But as I said earlier, it wasn't only about the media and what sort of made sense based on what was going on at the moment, but also the messaging. So we had to look through the messaging for all our clients and say, okay, what doesn't feel right now? What doesn't feel like it's authentic given what everybody's going through? So again, back to this sort of topic of building and continuing to build the trust and client reputations, we did that through pivoting, through
Yeah.
making some changes. And we did see that it did impact their business, not just from like a sales and revenue perspective, but we definitely got some feedback in terms of lots of positive sentiment that just confirmed that we were on the right path and that we were delivering authentic messaging in an authentic and relevant way to our consumers.
Yeah, and a lot of times that's what builds a loyal consumer base too. Even if it doesn't immediately translate into dollars, you build that awareness, you build that consideration, that brand loyalty, and then from there you'll see the monetary results. Not everything is always about ROI. You have to consider those other KPIs.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point, Monique, because sometimes we're all super focused on the short term and
Mhm.
the ROI and how is this impacting our business right this second. But there's
Mhm.
also something to be said about the long game and more of a branding element and just introducing your brand to people that may not know of it, and just kind of hanging in there and doing the right thing, and eventually it'll pay out.
Yeah. So one thing I mentioned in my intro is we're recording this in March, and March is Women's History Month, and March 8th is International Women's Day. And I've posed this question to a few industry movers and shakers in the last few weeks, but I want to hear your take too. Where do you see proper representation lacking for multicultural women, Latina women like yourself, the most? And what would you personally like to see changed for the future?
So unfortunately, I do think that we need to do better in terms of representation, and really that's across the board.
Hmm.
I don't know that there's any one specific category or brand that comes to mind that's like you're doing it right. It's something that needs to be very purposeful, very conscious, decision making in order to be more inclusive. And I'm so happy that that conversation is now at the forefront of of everything. Um, we're thinking about it not only in terms of our clients and targeting and whether there's missed opportunities, but also in terms of customized messaging. I think it's important, as I said earlier, to be authentic in your messaging, and that'll sort of translate to a return. But not only from that perspective, we're also thinking about it as a network. The Havas network is thinking about it. One of Havas's biggest initiatives right now is centered around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's
Mm-hmm.
specific in areas of recruitment and retention and development. So it's not only something that we're focused on from a network perspective, it's definitely trickling down to our agency. And even for me personally, I'm a member of our agency committee called the Greater Good, and one of our initiatives is D&I. When we bring it down to a personal level, and as I said, then even within the agency and the network, we're not only helping our employee culture, but then that will also make us more insightful when we're trying to direct our clients as well.
You said it right. There's definitely room to grow, but it is good to see us moving in a positive direction.
Absolutely.
So, Stephanie, we're already at the end of the time that we have today. So, let me kind of wrap this up with anyone that's listening who's enjoyed this conversation and wants to keep up with you or Republica Havas. Can you point them in the right direction of how they can get in contact or learn more?
Yes, for sure. You can look me up on LinkedIn, Stephanie Costa, as you said. And then for Republica Havas, you can find us across all of our social channels: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and our website as well, republicahavas.com.
Excellent. So we'll make sure to add those links to our website where this episode, this fireside chat will live. And thanks again for joining me.
Thank you so much, Monique. This was such a pleasure. I appreciate you inviting me to join you.
Of course. And thank you to those of you that are listening at home or on the go. We hope to continue to bring amazing guests like Stephanie in for more future fireside chats. You heard where you can go to reach Republica Havas, but if you want to know more about how Claritas intelligence can help you transform your marketing results, then connect with us on our social channels or visit our website, www.claritas.com.